Hello everyone, my name is Philip. I am the Director of User Experience at Freeletics, and today I want to catch up a little bit on a little challenge that I did a couple of days ago, where I was attempting to build and release an app for iOS within just 5 days. So today I want to basically do a little review of how that went, what I did, what worked for me, especially looking at the coding part of it. So this is not going to be a step-by-step guide about how to build an app in 5 days, but I want to share some of the learnings that have really helped me on this little project. So if you would like to embark on a similar journey, that it hopefully is a little bit easier for you. So as a bit of context, the app that I have built within those 5 days is called DoRepeat. It is on the App Store right now, and there is of course going to be a link in the description below. And what it does is it really helps you to nail those tasks that you have to do over and over again. So in comparison to your regular to-do list manager, it really focuses on recurring tasks, recurring checklists that you want to run over and over and over again. And it really tries to take all of the friction out of this. So today I would like to share 5 tips with you that have really helped me. And I'm actually just going to tell you what they are right now and then go into more detail, so feel free to jump ahead in the video if there's one of them that interests you in particular. So the 5 tips are: embrace the constraints, start with tutorials, not first principles, don't copy and paste, stop when things get easy, and be flexible on your plans. So let's jump right into it. So tip number 1, embrace the constraint. So as I said in the beginning, I was going to build this app within just 5 days. And that is obviously a very tight time box for anything. In my case, the reason for choosing 5 days was that I just had 5 vacation days. But I think it's actually a really good idea to have this kind of a time box in even larger projects, because it really forces you to make certain trade-offs and makes it easier to cut things and to make decisions about what to do and what not to do. And what this comes back to is a principle called fixed time flexible scope. So you basically set yourself a time frame in which you want to achieve a certain goal, but then you are flexible on what exactly the goal achievement looks like and what exactly the path you take there looks like. So for me, that meant I had ideas for 1,000 cool features that I never implemented because they just wouldn't have been possible to do in that time. It meant that I was pragmatic with a lot of design decisions in there, and it has really helped me to make good decisions about where to invest my time and where to skip ahead or postpone something for the future. All right, tip number 2. Start with tutorials and not first principles. What do I mean by that? Generally, when trying to do anything that you've never done before, there are 2 different ways to go about it. One is to start with first principles, learning exactly how everything works, figuring out, the ins and outs of the system, and then from that, building the actual thing that you would like to build. And this is, I think, basically the approach that is taught in schools mostly. Like, you learn the fundamentals first, and then you gradually build upon them. Now, the thing is, when you're doing something in a very short time, you don't really have the capacity for that, because it takes a long time to learn all the fundamentals, and for the particular goal that you have, you probably don't need all of those fundamentals. So what this meant in my case is that I have never written a single line of Swift code in my life. Swift is the programming language that you use to build iOS apps, and while I have some general knowledge and background in programming, I have not touched this particular language. I have not used the iOS frameworks ever. And honestly, it's been about 10 years since I've done any serious coding. So while, you didn't have to explain to me what an if statement and a variable are, I had absolutely no idea how exactly iOS worked. So I could have gone in and be like, okay, I'm going to read this book about iOS development first, and then I'm gonna, maybe build a sample app, but I didn't really have time for any of that, so I wanted to jump right in and get started on the thing that I actually wanted to build and learn how to do things along the way. And that's where tutorials really come in. So, of course, and this is not news to anyone, there are a million tutorials for coding for any language we can imagine out on the internet. And what you can do in order to make quick progress and still learn a lot of the language is to find tutorials that maybe solve parts of the problems that you have with the app. So for me, for example, it's a list-based app, so I needed to find some tutorial that showed me how to make something list-based. It wasn't going to be exactly what I needed, and that was never the goal, but it showed me the principles, and along the way I learned how exactly Swift worked and how the frameworks of iOS worked. And this worked pretty well for the entire process of building this app. So I found tutorials on building those lists, on generally working with Swift UI, on saving and persisting data, and so forth. So I was able to make progress very quickly, but at the same time, I felt like I actually learned the language and I'm now more capable in programming in Swift than I was before. And that is actually because of tip number 3. And tip number 3 is do not copy and paste. It is extremely, extremely tempting when you're working off of tutorials to just, select the code and like paste it over, or maybe download the sample project and then just try to fit it in there somehow. But the problem is, if you do that, you're not really going to learn anything, because you really don't sit with the problem that you're trying to solve. You're basically just taking magic blocks of code and putting them in there and hope that it works. But you're not really, or at least I wasn't really learning anything when I tried that. So what I did and what worked for me really well was I still used those tutorials, but I actually hand copied the code. So I typed it out all by myself, and I changed variable names to fit more with what I was doing. I changed the formatting a little bit and sometimes even made little adjustments to the functionality as I went along. And what that did for me is it really helped me to make some micro decisions already at the time when I was typing things out. And it also helped me between different tutorials to recognize when things were repeating and seeing basically the same code from different angles. And that really helped me figure out what all those blocks actually did and understand how I could use them on my own. So I think I really supercharged my learning journey of Swift UI and Swift by building the app in that way. Okay, so tip number 4, stop when things get easy. When you start working on something that you've never done before, you just won't have any idea of what is hard, what is easy, what's going to be fast, what's going to take a ton of time. You'll have to find all of that out as you go. And I think finding that out is actually the most important thing that you can do in the beginning, because it will then allow you to make much better decisions about where to invest your time in the short allotted time that you have. So basically what I did is I went through those tutorials and I typed it all out, and at some point I just realized, okay, for example, I now kind of know what styling UI looks like, how much work that is, and so I stopped investing into that, even though it would have been really, really gratifying to continue working on it, because at that time, I felt like I was able to actually do something. But instead I stopped and moved on to the next thing that seemed hard. That way I was able to quickly build up an understanding of what was easy and what was hard and where to invest my time. And then later in the process, I of course was able to come back to those topics and actually, bring them to a completion. And finally, tip number 5, be flexible with your plans. This really, in a way, is the accumulation of all the previous tips. So, as I said before, you won't know what is easy and what is hard. So it really doesn't make sense to build detailed plans in the beginning, because you will have no idea what you're walking into. So what I recommend instead is to stay really focused on the outcome that you want to achieve, and then essentially be flexible on everything else except for the time box. Because really, in the end, the goals of projects like these are to A, have something useful in the end, and B, learn something new. So I hope that through this video you have learned something new. If you have, then I would very much appreciate a little thumbs up on this video, and if you enjoy this, I plan to make more videos like these. Hit the subscribe button if you want to stay up to date on what is happening. And that just leaves me to say, have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you soon.